Hello, wine lovers. Thank you for joining me today on the Wine Road. During this podcast, you'll hear about the best value wine in the world for this year. And it just happens to be produced about 20 miles from my house. Let's make our way there on the Wine Road.
With that Zinfandel, we know what makes it special, so then we can make decisions throughout like a growing season or during harvest, always keeping our eye on the prize.
He's Andy Robinson, the winemaker at Seghesio Family Vineyards, who was recently recognized as Wine Spectator's 2024 Wine Value of the Year. You know what that means. For about $25, you can find a very good tasting wine from your local grocer or wine shop. Can it be easy to make such a good wine at that price? Well, stay tuned and you'll discover, no, it's not. It's not easy. I'm Jeff Davis. On the Wine Road podcast is sponsored by Sonoma Clean Power. For those of you in this beautiful region, learn how your actions can make a greater impact with clean, renewable energy at poweringeverydaymoments.org. That's poweringeverydaymoments.org. If you don't live in Sonoma County, see if you can find renewable energy in your area. This year, Seghesio Family Vineyards will be bottling their 130th vintage. They've been deeply committed to growing and bottling Zinfandel, in addition to other tasty Italian varietals and blends, but it was their 2022 Sonoma County Zinfandel that Wine Spectator thought was the best wine you could buy for the price. So I felt compelled to sit down with Andy to congratulate him and his team. I joined him in their comfortable cellar lounge below the tasting room and back behind their stack of barrels. You can see photos on my website, onthewineroad.us. I started our conversation by saying how nice it is to get recognized for hard work.
Absolutely. This came as a pretty big surprise to us.
Yeah.
But man, to just come out of the last couple of years of difficult working times and to have this on top of it really made it feel complete.
Now, I remember when we were talking on the phone a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that you were on this list last year, but you came in like, what, 5th place?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it was last year or it was the year prior, but
okay.
I think it was for the 2019 vintage. And so maybe that came out in 2021 or 2022. But regardless, it was 5th, and it still felt like a huge accomplishment just to get called out.
But you definitely said, kind of nice to win this year.
Yeah.
Or be at the top.
I mean, to just be at the top and to see the kind of exciting energy that it generated and the number of people that saw that because it was number one and not just further down the list, it was like night and day.
And even though there's only 10 wineries from across the globe, even if you are 5th, that's still, it's a huge accomplishment. Yeah. You also indicated that what's special about this recognition is the fact that it's a high-production wine, not an expensive brand that often gets good reviews, but a wine that reaches a much larger group of consumers.
Yeah, over the time in my career, I've worked for only a couple different wineries, actually, and one of them was Charles Krug. It was Peter Mondavi family, who also made CK Mondavi, which is a big production wine. Now,
Right.
So basically, to be able to have a wine that is our key, like our go-to wine that is, we think of it as the hook. This is the wine that we want to introduce people to Seghesio with.
Sure.
We want it to be available. We want this to be on the table, midweek for people's dinners, where they don't have to overthink it. It serves as an introduction to Seghesio wines, but also as an introduction to Zinfandel for many people.
Yeah.
And that's really important to be able to get this kind of recognition for that type of wine.
Mm-hmm. And what's good about this list is that it indicates a range of high-quality wines being made around the world at these affordable prices, which these days is good news.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these times you have inflation. Really, that's our biggest struggle is fighting against inflation and trying to keep our wines accessible. That's something that, in general, the wine industry struggles with. Everyone, just pursues that high price, that 95 plus point wine or whatever it happens to be, whatever kind of score you're shooting for. You strive for perfection. It makes sense, but also to be able to hit a consistent level of excellence, and we're routinely hitting, getting a score of say 91, 92, 93 for the wine that we're putting out there to the world. Literally, we're shipping this wine in export too, so it serves as attractant for people in Europe or Asia or Africa, South America to try our wines.
That's great.
From California, from Sonoma County.
We see a lot of those countries' wines here, so it's nice that you're getting out there to those countries as well.
Wine Spectator's list of the top 10 value wines of 2024 also included Roederer Estate in Alexander Valley, which is part of the Champagne-Louis Roederer family, Argyle Winery in Oregon, another sparkling wine house, Rufino and Antinori of Italy, Frank family in Napa Valley, and Dry Creek Vineyard of Sonoma County, which is almost a neighbor of Seghesio, Craggy Range in New Zealand, Bodega Terrazas de los Andes in Argentina, and La Rioja Alta in Spain. Those are some notable wineries who didn't quite make it to the top of the list.
Yeah, it was a interesting collection of brands because, ironically, some of those for our household are go-to wines. I mean, Roederer in Anderson Valley is, every time we're driving to Mendocino, you just have to stop there.
Right.
And, I guess we always kind of consider ourselves as a contemporary in that set. And the wine that they mentioned there for them is also very available and very consistent.
Yeah.
And similar for the Dry Creek wines. Now they also make Zinfandel, but we know, I know they're I think it was the Fumé Blanc, which is really good. It's just a good go-to wine. So I'm less familiar with I'm familiar with the brands, but less familiar with the actual wines. But the Rufino, again.
Yeah, you see that a lot.
You see it all over.
Yeah.
So it sets you in this group that is a good peer group to be in.
Certainly. And what's impressive is that you and the others who are bottling more than 110,000 cases, over 112,000 in your case, you're able to maintain quality and produce them at a budget-friendly price. And that has to be challenging.
That's a real challenge. I mean, the consistency part is a challenge. Sourcing, and just when I say sourcing, I mean, in the greater term, like half of ours is grown ourselves. We source it from ourselves. I think of it that way, but we control it really tightly. And then as those concentric circles go out, you get a little bit less control. You have to keep your eye on that really carefully. And so we have a really tight-knit group of growers that are really close to us that, we talk to on a daily or weekly basis. But during harvest, it's daily, sometimes hourly, talking to growers.
Right.
The most important ones, one of them is the Saini family that we work really closely with.
Classic.
The Mounts family. Some of our growers out there, they're partners. We're not in this just from a transactional basis where they're growing grapes, we're buying them. Their future's tied to our success as a whole. Yeah, and it's really important to keep that in mind.
Sure, you have to trust what they're doing, and
You do a good job of making sure that they know what they're doing,
which is expected in this industry.
And there's a second part to that I'd say, we've always had a good sense of it. You have to know what your goal is when you're making a wine, and that and you have to always be coming back to that. So with that Zinfandel, we know what makes it special. And so then we can make those decisions throughout like a growing season or during harvest, always keeping like our eye on the prize. We know what we're looking for from each vineyard, and if we're afraid we're not going to get it, we have to make sure that we can, correct for that and make up for it somewhere else, like, temperatures or, climate, and just keeping our eye on like how do we have to gradually shift sourcing or growing methods to account for it.
Because on that topic, the consumer who's buying the wine in a grocery store or a liquor store, and they love it, they keep going back year after year, and it has to taste the same to them.
Yeah,
that's gotta be a challenging part too.
I always think I remember when I started in the industry, there was a little bit of a negative stigma toward California wines, and that like vintage didn't matter. I remember hearing that 25 years ago, like, in a sense, you want the consistency but you also want the vintage to matter. So it's a very fine line. Like, you can't say, "Oh, it's a terrible vintage, so all our wines are terrible." That's not okay. So you have this balance of true to the vintage. You want to represent what that vintage gave you in the wines, but also it has to be excellent.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And I think the people that though buy it in the grocery store
Yeah.
aren't quite a discerning level, and
Yeah.
they're just happy to get that wine that they love again.
Yep.
I mean, one of the things I've always said about what I love about the industry and are challenged by is that the romance of it is that you can have a great year, a great vintage like 2009 and others that you find this wine that you just adore, and then a couple of years later it's gone. And it'll never come back again. It might come back in a different form, in a sense, and different flavor profile, but you miss that.
Each bottle is truly a time capsule. I mean, it's you're really capturing what happened in that place in that year, and you're capturing all the decisions that were made by all the people that had their hand in it. It's, if you start to think of it that way, it's crazy.
It is
how amazing the product is. Just a bottle of wine.
Yeah, there's like 100 or more people who have touched that bottle or that wine over the period of time. And I try to tell that to people when they're like, yeah, wine's all right. It's like, when you're drinking that, you got to think about all that went through to get this bottle to your table. Because there's a lot that happened.
Oh, it's crazy. We were looking at just the list of people that worked for us during that harvest. And that's just here at the winery, in the vineyards and at the winery. And you start going back, you're like, oh, geez. And of course, some people aren't working with us anymore, or they were just a seasonal intern. We had one from China, I think, that year. We had 3 from Argentina, and 1 from Spain. Just people from all over the world to help make that.
And you've done that too as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I did. I only did 1 harvest overseas, and that was in New Zealand. But tasting, being able to experience wineries overseas has been a big fun part of my life.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I think if I was in your position, I would have done that as much as I could at that time. Well, you got a late start, though, didn't you?
I did get kind of a late start. It was, and I found, actually, it's partially because I found my spot early. I didn't expect to, I started with Seghesio in 2003. I didn't expect that I'd still be here 20 years later. But you think it might take you a while to find your way, and I was able to find my way in the same place, doing different jobs over the years.
Well, and you had that experience at Krug, which was a great location to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be back with more questions for Andy after this message from my sponsor.
Sonoma Clean Power is proudly celebrating 10 years of serving Sonoma and Mendocino counties as your local, not-for-profit electricity provider. In the early 2000s, California passed legislation allowing cities and counties to create community choice power providers, public agencies owned by the community they serve. SCP began in 2014 and immediately launched Evergreen, our 100% local, renewable service that became a model for the nation. Since then, we've saved customers millions of dollars while reducing greenhouse gas emissions, investing in our communities, and brought energy education to our schools. We've advocated for grid reliability, climate safety, and also increased the number of electric cars and bikes on our roads. Together with our customers, we've made great progress, and we're not done yet. Join us as we continue to light the way during the next 10 electric years. Sonoma Clean Power. Innovation grown locally.
As Andy Robinson and I are talking about his Seghesio 2022 Zinfandel from Sonoma County, the top value wine released in 2024, I read that the grapes were harvested in 150 small lots and fermented for 10 days on the skins. That led me to ask, how many fermenters do you have going at one time?
So at the peak of harvest, and there's obviously we start up and there's a ramp up to where we get to capacity. In the time it takes us to get to capacity, if it's not like some years are crazy. It's like 2022 is actually pretty crazy vintage. We went from Friday. I vividly remember like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before Labor Day, thinking we're tasting samples, and it wasn't. stuff wasn't ready. And then we said, well, you know what? It's going to be really hot starting like Sunday, I think, or Sunday or Monday. And we don't know how long that's going to last. So we're like, maybe we should wait as long as we can and then pick a couple things on Saturday. And we really don't ideally want to pick on Labor Day. But in that year, we had to do something. So we started, and then we just didn't stop for the next 10 days. We just got to pick because we broke records in Sonoma County that year, 3 out of 5 days in that week of Labor Day, and maxed out at around 117 degrees up in Alexander Valley. It was incredibly intense heat. Forces you to make just decisions a little bit differently. So.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of decisions,
I realized I didn't actually answer the question, but we do have about 100 total fermenters. And those all would be going at the exact same time, but usually that period of being totally full is only about a week out of the whole span of harvest.
Right.
And then you start ramping down. You're getting those out and filling barrels, but that week is really the scheduling nightmare, where every day you drain a tank, you press it the next day, you fill it later that day. So it's
And so now you're talking about everything that you bottle. Pretty much, not just the Sonoma County.
So
Zinfandel.
we would, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I saw that you prefer very few new oak barrels on your wines, in addition to utilizing American and French oak barrels, and that combination is kind of the sweet spot for you.
Yeah, it is. We do with the new oak for the wine that received the Sonoma Zinfandel. The new oak is mostly American. But that percentage new is very low. It's about 7%. And then probably gets some French oak that is maybe once filled. It's been filled once, and then it's had wine in it for about a year. So actually that's a sweet spot, is that second use. That second fill on a barrel is usually kind of perfect. You still get a sense of the oak. You still have really active wood tannins that are going to react with the wine. Mm-hmm. But the toastiness, that punchiness that you can get in a brand new barrel is faded. Right. And so that helps a lot. That helps the wines just kind of give you a softer impression of the oak. Mm-hmm. And then also format is important. So we, on this gradual progression of increasing the size of our barrels and trying to shift away from the 225's kind of standard Bordeaux barrel size, and trying to shift gradually into more 500-liter puncheons, and then also some larger casks, which it can just also soften that impression of the oak.
Maybe someday you'll get back to these guys that are behind us.
Yeah, the ones behind you, those redwoods, those are probably 120 years old.
Yeah, I bet.
Super cool tanks.
They're beautiful.
Saving that project for, I have to convince some people, but I'd love to try something like that, but done with a modern eye. Mm-hmm. But it would be, I've never tasted wine made in redwood without the resin. I think they'd have to be air dried a really long time.
I was going to say, I would think it would have a bit of a sweet element to it.
Yeah, I'm just curious to taste it made in a new redwood tank. I don't know.
You were talking about the different vineyards and partners that you work with, and I was reading about the Montafi Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
That's in Russian River Valley. Mm-hmm. It's a historic vineyard featuring some of the more usual varieties of the late 1800s and early 20th century, like Alicante Boucher, Petit Syrah, Trousseau, even Petit Boucher, and Pelderson.
Yep.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, so I've heard of it, but so with that vineyard, that's actually our newest vineyard that we own. So
you own that one now.
Yeah, so we purchased it in 2014. It came up, and it was available. And it was a really good opportunity for us to kind of put our foot in the ground and say, that's an old vine vineyard in Russian River Valley. You could kind of predict the future of that if it sold to someone that didn't make Zinfandel. So it's probably going to be pulled out and converted to Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. But our interest is in old vine Zinfandel. And so it was perfect. It was a good fit for us.
Right.
It was something that we could those are pictures of it right there.
Oh, nice.
And those are from probably around 2014, 2015. And it looks a lot different now. We farm it quite different than the previous owners.
Yeah, a lot of those varieties are head trained, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So this vineyard is about 14 acres of head trained and another 7 of that was on trellis. And we had grafted, the trellis was Pinot Noir. When we got it, we grafted it to Zinfandel. And we're just working on, keeping those old vines in the ground.
Yeah, I'm glad there's organizations out there that do the same thing and try to maintain those and rescue them.
Yeah, well, that's the biggest thing is you can't plant old vines. So if they're in the ground, you got to keep them there if you want to make wine from them. So.
Those are the ones that they call mixed blacks.
Yep. And so that vineyard in particular, so those vineyards planted in 1926. So that time frame, if you think about, we're in Prohibition, and you might think it's so, farmers are still planting vineyards in Prohibition. And at that time, they were selling a lot of fresh fruit to be made, into wine by home winemakers in Chicago, New York, all across the country. And Alicante, those other varietals that were in there as a field blend were really important for those home winemakers. Alicante is a grape that ships really well and has tons of color. So the wine that people made wherever they were making it was it was better because they could actually get some color in it.
Yeah,
so a lot of times home winemaking, and I don't know how they did it quite during Prohibition, but it's hard to make really good deep wines without
right.
Without means to heat the fermenter, small volumes. It can be a struggle, but Alicante was highly sought after.
Yeah. And Petit Syrah's always played well with Zinfandel.
It always has, yeah.
You almost always have that in a blend.
I mean, almost. There's a few of our wines where we intentionally don't put it in, with a Cortina and a Rock Pile, but that's because those vineyards didn't have it in there. They're planted at a different time in history, so...
And I would say Rock Pile doesn't need any more assistance.
It does not need more tannin, typically, yeah.
That's a wonderful vineyard. Getting back to the grocery stores and the familiar wines, I recently reconnected with a former radio colleague. He lives in Tulsa now, and he knows that I live in Sonoma County, and they're big fans of Zinfandel, he told me. So when this came up that I would be interviewing you, I sent him the article from Wine Spectator and said, hey, look at this. I'm going to be talking with Andy for the second time, coming up very soon. And his comment was, oh, yeah, we love that Seghesio. We usually buy a case of it at a time.
Those are the kind of customers we love.
Of course, yes.
They just, and also they're sharing it with all their friends. Mm-hmm. And people get to, that's the word of mouth is the best marketing tool you can have. So, so much more likely to, you tasted this at a friend's house for dinner. Like, heck yeah, I'm going to go buy that.
I was impressed that he was willing to get a case at a time. I didn't think he was that much of a drinker, so it's like, well, good for you. I'm glad you like it. That's great. In addition to the many vineyards at your disposal, you must have plenty of assistants in the cellar and such. Do you want to give some props to any of your crew?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind when we get some sort of an award or accolade like this is that I always feel pretty humble that it's my name on there. Mm-hmm. And granted, I'm leading a big team. So we have a whole group of really important vineyard workers that are half are seasonal and some are, and the rest are permanent. And that's led by Ned Newmiller, our viticulture director. Right. So he's a 5th generation Seghesio family member too. And then you have our whole cellar crew. If we added up all their years of experience here at this winery, which is the amazing part, you'd probably have across 10 people, you probably have 250 years of experience. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And so, they know what they're doing every year, and they know the job. And we add to it. We always have more to do, but they execute really, really carefully every year. Have a cellar master, assistant winemaker, enologist. Like, without all of these people, we wouldn't be able to put that wine in the bottle. No. And then I wanted to expand too, is that without our sales team and our marketing team, like, no one would know about it. It would be like if we made one amazing barrel of wine and no one could taste it. But our sales team gets it out there to all these places and develops these networks and relationships that help get the wine on the shelf in the first place. It's a tall task to navigate the three-party system in the U.S. So,
when we sat down together the last time for the interview, it was during the height of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was 2020, and we were celebrating Seghesio's 125th anniversary at that point. Here we are 5 years later, so this would be the 130th anniversary year.
Yeah. So actually we were supposed to have a big party that year. The 2020.
Right, sure.
Yeah, 2020 we're going to have a big party. I don't know exactly what it was going to look like, but we didn't get too far in planning it once March came around.
Right.
So we don't have anything big planned for this year, but what we did do is, and it looked really nice, I thought, but the 2020 Sonoma Zin had a 125th anniversary on the bottle, and I thought that looked pretty sharp. I'll have to bring that one up. Are we going to do anything different for the 2025 vintage? It's still on the vines, not even growing yet, but
That's right.
It's not too early to start thinking about it.
It goes fast.
It does. Time goes too fast.
And time always goes too fast when I'm interviewing a winemaker who's sharing wine and stories. Andy Robinson. Congrats to him and his team for making a desirable wine for around $20. Look for more of their wines on the shelves, visit Seghesio.com, or stop by the winery if you're in Healdsburg, California. It's always a welcoming environment. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you liked it, I appreciate a positive review if that's an option. Find more interviews, wine trivia, and photos at onthewineroad.us or .com. I'm on Facebook as On the Wine Road and Instagram as JD Wine Road. The open and closing themes are composed by Marscott. I'm Jeff Davis. I'll talk to you soon here on the Wine Road.